Hello, welcome. As the Sleep and History channel, I am here with you this evening in an incredibly enjoyable way as I research. Could you have lived in North Korea? The details of this topic, perhaps not one to dream about, will be revealed by the end of the night. Greetings to all my friends from all the historical journeys we've experienced until now. If you are meeting me for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because every night here, we travel through a different history. Let's begin. Now imagine. World War I is over. The world is in a rush to establish a new order. On the Korean peninsula, liberated from Japan, things are complicated. The Soviets in the north, the Americans in the south. Everyone is trying to impose their own ideology. Amid this chaos, in mid-1948, our brother Kim Il-sung takes the stage. With the support of the Soviets, he declares the establishment of North Korea. In the south, there is a US-backed administration. Well, either side is very happy with this situation. You might remember the Korean War. It's been the subject of movies. That war was actually the breaking point of the tension between the two Koreas. The war ends, but there's no agreement or anything. Just a ceasefire. So technically, they are still at war. This is also part of the reason why North Korea has such a closed and militarized structure. To solidify his rule, Kim Il-sung introduces Juche, the idea of self-reliance. He says, "We have nothing. We shape everything ourselves." Of course, this Jewish philosophy becomes the justification for closing the economy and increasing political pressure. But to understand this, we need to understand the founding story in a bit more detail. The year is 1945. World War II has finally ended. The world has breathed a deep sigh of relief. Japan has finally been brought to its knees. The Korean peninsula is also liberated from Japanese occupation. Ah, the Koreans probably said. But hold on, it's too early to rejoice. Because those coming in the guise of liberators would actually bring their own problems. Before taking the stage, the Soviet Union appears. They position themselves in the north of the peninsula. Immediately after, the United States drops anchor in the south. This is yours, this is mine. The two superpowers divided along the 38th parallel, as if slicing a pizza into two. This wasn't an innocent matter of bringing democracy, of course. This was actually the first act of the Cold War, and poor Korea would be caught right in the middle of this ideological clash. While communist ideas flourished in the north, capitalist seeds were being sown in the south. And it is at this point that our main character enters the stage, Kim Il-sung, a guerrilla leader who fought against Japanese occupation. The Soviets find him and promote him to lead the north, thinking, "This is the man we've been looking for." In 1948, North Korea is officially established under the name the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In the south, the US-backed Syngman re-establishes a separate state. The peninsula was one people, but now it was two states. This would create an effect greater than the flap of a butterfly's wings. After North Korea is established, does Kim Il-sung sit idle? No. His goal is not just to rule the north, but to unite the entire Korean peninsula under his ideology. This leads us to the Korean War. But let's save that topic for another video. After the war, Kim Il-sung solidifies his rule even more. He establishes a closed system against any possible external influence. He places Juche, self-reliance, at the foundation of the country. This philosophy is actually embedded everywhere. It means planning everything ourselves, but in practice, It meant the complete closure from the outside world and the unconditional, unquestioned elevation of the leader. From television to radio, from school textbooks to daily newspapers, everywhere there are pictures, words, and achievements of Kim Il-sung. A cult of personality is created. Now he is not just a head of state, but a near-divine figure referred to with titles like Eternal Leader, Son of the Nation. Like we call some singers superstars? This is like 1,000 times that. Fear and propaganda become the two most important pillars of the regime. People's ties with the outside world are severed. All information is filtered. Anyone who says or does something wrong is immediately punished. There are even strange situations like three-generation punishment. Imagine if your grandfather made a mistake, you pay the price. This casts the oppressive, harsh character onto North Korea's genes. Kim Il-sung, initially seen as a liberator, becomes a one-man ruler, determining the country's fate alone. This is the story of how the flap of a butterfly's wings, a small beginning, turned into a massive dictatorship. So, who is this Kim Il-sung? Let's look at that a bit. Kim Il-sung's real name is actually Kim Song-ju. He was born in 1912 as the child of an ordinary farmer. In his youth, he joined guerrilla groups fighting against Japanese occupation. Yes, that's true. But what made him a hero was the Soviet Union placing him at the head of Korea. The Soviets were looking for a loyal communist leader for Korea and decided to find Kim Song-ju and strengthen him. There are even claims that they gave the young Kim Song-ju the name of another guerrilla leader who had fought against the Japanese and become famous, Kim Il-sung, so that he would be accepted more quickly among the people. So, you understand, the definition of heroism was somewhat imported. After the war, with Soviet tanks entering Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung was bestowed the title, Son of the Nation. Of course, this title wasn't just a name. Propaganda machines immediately went into action. Songs and marches praising him to the skies were written. His heroism was constantly told in school books, newspapers, and radio broadcasts. So much so that in North Korea, instead of saying the sun rises, they could say, Kim Il-sung rises. Imagine, Kim Il-sung's rise wasn't just due to Soviet support, of course. He knew his business too. After the Korean War, he eliminated all his rivals. Some were sent into exile, some were declared enemies of the people and executed. So you understand, anyone who had an eye on his seat was immediately dealt with. Thus, one man, even one family rule was established in practice. It is at this point that the Jewish formula comes into play. We talked about self-reliance in the last video. Actually, this philosophy was a tool to further elevate Kim Il-sung. As if the country didn't need any help from outside. Everything was solved by his extraordinary wisdom. This was the most clever way to separate people from the outside world and ensure their absolute loyalty to the regime. From buildings to relationships, in squares and even on the walls of homes, everything was tied to images of Kim Il-sung. Massive structures and statues were built in his honor. The 170-meter Jewish tower in Pyongyang symbolizes his philosophy. Newborn babies were given his name. Every year, his birthday was celebrated with enthusiasm. As if he wasn't just a leader, but the country itself. So, how sunny were the days of this man who saluted the sun? Or did the regime he built turn him into a legend? Actually, he was both legend and reality. He was a real person. Yes. But the system he built, the propaganda he made, and the absolute control over the people turned him into an immortal legend, even a god. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, his title didn't change. eternal president. So technically, North Korea's president is still him. Imagine, a country's president has died but still sits in his seat. This is North Korea's extraordinary reality. Now imagine. The year is 1950, the month is June. While the summer sun warms the Korean peninsula, there is actually a pot boiling underneath. On both sides of the 38th parallel, Kim Il-sung in the north and Syngman Rhee in the south are gnashing their teeth at each other. Both want to unite the entire peninsula under their ideology. Encouraged by the Soviet Union and China, Kim Il-sung gives the order one morning to suddenly attack the south. The calendar shows June 25, 1950. Imagine, you wake up on an ordinary summer morning to the sounds of tanks and artillery fire. South Korea's army is caught unprepared, and northern troops advance at lightning speed. The capital Seoul falls within 3 days. The United States and its allies are shocked, wondering, what's happening here? Because this meant the first hot conflict of the Cold War. The US, wanting to stop the spread of communism, gets a decision from the UN Security Council and leads an international force to intervene. Of course, meanwhile, the Soviet Union was boycotting the Security Council meetings, so the decision passes easily. It's like a theater play, isn't it? United Nations forces, including Turkish soldiers, set foot in Korea, and from that moment on, the war begins to experience a full swing. First, UN forces push the north almost to the Chinese border. Then China says, "I'm here too," joins the war, and pushes UN forces back to the 38th parallel. So it's like both sides constantly pushing and pulling, a stalemate. My dear friend, to understand North Korea, we actually need to understand this self-reliance, Juche. So let's go back a bit. The year is the 1950s. The Korean War is over. North Korea is in ruins. But Kim Il-sung, our son president, is not a man to give up easily. On one side, there's the Soviet Union. On the other, there's the rapidly strengthening China. North Korea was caught between them, like a small cucumber between two giant sharks. Kim Il-sung is not very pleased with this situation. Why? Because being too dependent on external powers could threaten his own power. Having to obey instructions coming from Moscow or Beijing didn't sit well with him. It is precisely in the suffocated atmosphere in 1955 that Kim Il-sung introduces that famous Juche philosophy. Its literal meaning is self-reliance, being the subject. The idea underlying it is this: the master and ultimate unifier of the Korean Revolution is the Korean people. Korea's problems must be solved with Korea's own strength. So he says, "Hey folks, we don't need the Soviets or China. We have the intelligence, courage, and strength to take care of ourselves." Of course, this narrative was a great tool to exalt the leader and separate from other communist models. Like a father saying to his children, "I am enough for you," but on a national scale. So what did the Juche formula mean in practice? On paper, it sounds like a strong, independent nation, right? Come on, but you see, this philosophy evolved into a kind of departure from the world. First, economic self-sufficiency was targeted. From coal to steel, from tractors to fertilizer, it was believed that everything should be produced within the country. Foreign trade was minimized. Imports and exports almost came to a standstill. Imagine a country trying to produce everything on its own. How sustainable could this be in the modern world? Of course, it wasn't. Technology fell behind. Industry couldn't develop. People's standard of living declined. But the important thing was that no one interfered from outside, right? Even though people went hungry as a result, so be it. It was Juche. Later, the military dimension came. Self-defense capability was personalized. That's why North Korea is so obsessed with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Because according to the Juche philosophy, this is the only way to ensure our own deterrence. We don't trust anyone. We protect ourselves. This motto dragged them into the nuclear adventure over time. And of course, most importantly, ideological separation. Juche was presented as an ideology unique to Korea, different from communism and Marxism-Leninism. So Kim Il-sung said, "The ideologies of the Russians and Chinese are for them. Our ideology is special for us." This solidified his absolute authority over the regime. Now he wasn't just a political leader, but also the country's soul and unquestioned thinker, philosopher, and guide. Books, songs, movies, everything did propaganda for the Juche philosophy. The flow of information from outside was completely cut off. There's no such thing as the internet. They even adapted the Korean language to suit Juche. They changed some words. Juche built a wall completely isolating North Korea from the outside world. Thanks to this philosophy, the regime could control people's movements and thoughts. Because everything coming from outside was seen as a threat to Juche. In conclusion, a country completely disconnected from the outside, creating a bubble within itself, a country where the leader's word is not questioned. So self-reliance actually became a very fancy name for departure from the world. Now imagine, what is it like to be the son of a son president like Kim Il-sung? You probably don't have a normal childhood. That's exactly what Kim Jong-il was like. He grew up in his father's shadow, underwent strict ideological training, and was prepared as the crown prince. But he had a passion that set him apart from other dictators. You'll say, "No way," when you hear it. Cinema. Yes, you heard right. Kim Jong-il was a complete cinephile. Rumor has it his personal film collection had over 20,000 films. He watched every kind of film you can think of, from Hollywood action movies to James Bond series, from Godzilla to Rambo. It's even said some films were watched repeatedly. Maybe he even got inspiration for that famous hairstyle from an action movie character. Who knows? So why was a dictator's film collection so important? Was it just a hobby? Of course not. Kim Jong-il knew very well how powerful a tool cinema was for propaganda. He made his own films, showed them to people, and used these films to strengthen loyalty to the leader and the regime's power. He even went so far as to kidnap the famous South Korean director Shin Sang-ok and actress Choi Eun-hee in 1978, took them to North Korea, and gave them instructions to make better films. Can you believe a dictator kidnapped people to make films? If Hollywood wrote this script, they'd probably say it's too exaggerated. With Kim Il-sung's death in 1994, Kim Jong-il assumed the leadership. But the country he took over wasn't in great shape. The Soviet Union had collapsed. North Korea's biggest support was gone. The country was in a serious economic crisis, even at the level of a famine disaster. It was during this difficult period that Kim Jong-il introduced his own management formula, the Sungun policy, i.e., military first policy. According to this policy, all the country's resources and priorities should be given to the military. While people were starving, the army was fed, armed, and strengthened. What was the goal? To ensure deterrence against external threats, especially the US and South Korea, and to get a guarantee for his power against possible internal rebellions. Because if you have a strong army in hand, no one can defy you, right? So actually, this was an effort to build an empire of fear and feel secure himself. Now imagine. The Korean War is over. North Korea is in ruins, but the biggest fear is still alive: the United States. The US knew very well that nuclear weapons had been used in the war, and that the threat of their use existed. Even China's development of nuclear weapons made Kim Il-sung think, "We need to do it too." In the eyes of North Korean leaders, nuclear weapons were not just a tool of destruction, but also the only guarantee of their survival. Imagine if you have an atomic bomb. No one can easily dare to attack you, right? So actually, this was an effort to build an empire of fear and feel secure. The first steps were taken in the 1950s. North Korea began receiving help on nuclear energy from the Soviet Union. It was supposedly planned for peaceful nuclear research. But of course, the word peaceful could have different meanings in the North Korean dictionary. Indeed, a nuclear research reactor in the Yongbyon region of the country became operational. This began to set off alarm bells in the world. The debate over whether they were making an atomic bomb was brought to the international agenda. By the 1990s, North Korea's efforts to develop nuclear weapons had become an undeniable fact. Especially Kim Jong-il accelerated the nuclear program. As an extension of the Sungun, military-first policy, nuclear weapons were seen as the country's lifeline. While the people suffered from hunger, no concession was made from the nuclear program. Even food and humanitarian aid from outside were used as bargaining chips for the nuclear program. North Korea's nuclear adventure looks like a real tension movie scenario. Secret tests in underground tunnels, ballistic missile launches, and statements threatening the world were all part of a great show put on stage. The first nuclear test was carried out in 2006, during Kim Jong-il's era. The world is shocked. The United Nations imposed successive sanctions. But it can't be said that North Korea cared much. Each new test, each new missile launch was a message of defiance to the international community. We are here and we are advancing. With Kim Jong-un coming to power, this adventure gained even more speed. The young leader took the program even further than he inherited from his father. The number of nuclear tests increased. The range of ballistic missiles. They claim they can now even reach US soil with these missiles. They even announced that they increased their destructive capacity with thermonuclear, i.e., hydrogen bomb tests. They look like the living example of the villain cliché from Hollywood movies, with plans to take over the world. So what is the secret reality of North Korea's crazy nuclear adventure? Is it just a show of power or the regime's survival strategy? Experts say it's both a search for a security guarantee and a bargaining chip against the outside world. Lifting sanctions, food aid, international recognition. All these were things they tried to get in return for the nuclear program. This situation continues to be a constant threat to South Korea, Japan, and the US. Will they ever actually use them? It keeps the tension in the region at a high level. North Korea's nuclear program is no longer just a secret of their own backyard, but has become a critical issue concerning the entire world. You wake up one morning in North Korea. There's a leader's picture on your wall. You don't turn on the TV. If you do, your leader's heroism is being told. When you go to work, giant portraits of your leader, slogans, and loudspeakers greet you on the streets. You go to school. The first thing you learn is loyalty to your leader. So in short, the Kim family has permeated every moment of life. But it's not just leader love. It's almost a state of worship. Propaganda in North Korea is not just a communication tool, it's also a way of life. the most basic directive of the regime. Leaders are presented as almost sacred figures. For example, Kim Il-sung's birth is filled with miracles. Stories like, "The mountains cried when Kim Jong-il died," are fed to the people. This is not just ordinary hero-making. It's literally deification. Like the superhero games our kids play, but a reality that an entire nation believes in. Propaganda in North Korea is woven so intricately that calling it brainwashing wouldn't be wrong. From a young age, children are raised being told how sublime the leader is, how the country is a paradise, and how evil external enemies are. Books, movies, music, even cartoons are used to instill this ideology. Remember Kim Jong-il's famous passion for cinema. He was also aware of the power of these tools. So what are the basic messages of this propaganda? First, the leader is infallible and of superior intelligence. Second, North Korea is the best, strongest, and most just country. And perhaps most importantly, the outside world, especially the US and South Korea, is evil and treacherous. The North Korean people are made to believe that people in the Western world live in misery, that America is ready to attack them at any moment, and that South Korea is a puppet of the US. All information from outside is strictly censored. The internet is almost non-existent. There's one television channel, completely state-controlled and only broadcasts propaganda. Radio's frequencies are fixed, so there's no chance of tuning into another station. Even the radios in homes are often fixed to receive only state broadcasts. Imagine, your only information about the outside world consists of the terrible stories told by the regime. This situation creates deep paranoia and hostility towards the outside world. It's as if there's a giant monster outside waiting to devour you. Propaganda is not limited to media. There are neighborhood committees, people's committees in every district and workplace. They encourage people to watch each other and report any wrong word or behavior. People feel constantly watched. This is one of the biggest fears created by propaganda. In North Korea, even art and entertainment are part of propaganda. You may have seen the mass games, shows organized with public participation. In these shows where people perform incredibly choreographed movements with colored cards, although they appear fascinating, they are actually displays of the regime's power, absolute control, and the discipline of the masses. Every movement, every color symbolizes the greatness of the leader and the power of the regime. As a result, North Korea's propaganda machinery has signed a success in shaping and controlling a nation's mind. But it's not just about giving information to individuals. It's about manipulating their perception of reality, determining how they see the world. In Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, a typical morning begins with patriotic marches rising from loudspeakers. Mrs. Lee, with sleepy eyes, gets up as usual and pays a brief moment of respect to the picture of the leader. What's for breakfast? Don't expect a variety of cheese and olives. Probably something made of corn porridge or a little rice. Because the economic situation isn't bright, even white bread is often a luxury. Imagine, the ordinary things most of us have for breakfast maybe come to the table there once a month or year. Children put on their uniforms and go to school immediately. The lessons at school are a bit different from ours. A large part of the curriculum is filled with the Kim family's revolutionary achievements and the glory of Juche. There are subjects like math and science, of course, but the leader's genius is taught in every field. As if behind every formula, every equation, there's a leader story. Adults go to work. In North Korea, the private sector is almost non-existent. Everyone works for the state. Factories, fields, offices, everyone is like a cog. Mrs. Lee's husband, Mr. Kim, works as a machine operator in a factory. Before and after work, like all employees, he attends ideological meetings. In these meetings, news read from official organs, the leader's latest speeches, and rules to be followed are listened to. Sometimes these meetings can turn into a kind of confession session where people guide each other to the right path. Lunch is usually eaten at the workplace and is quite modest. The menu consists mostly of rice, corn, or potatoes, with maybe a little vegetable or pickle on the side. During the day, activities presented as collective work are frequently organized. Is this everyone volunteering for the country's development? Actually, it means compulsory labor. Road repairs, agricultural work, or construction projects, everyone is made to participate in some way. Social life in North Korea is quite collective. Individualism is not well regarded. Everyone must belong to a community, a unit. This collectivism is used to maintain control by the regime. There are committee systems called inminbin in neighborhoods. Each inminbin consists of about 20 to 40 households, and through these committees, people watch each other. It's a system where your neighbor can report you. This naturally creates an environment of insecurity. You can't fully trust anyone, because even a misunderstanding can get you in trouble. Communication with the outside world is almost non-existent. Phones can only make domestic calls. Internet access is only for a very limited and privileged few. Radio's frequencies are fixed to state channels. So the only way to know what's happening in the world is what the regime tells. This shows why the propaganda machinery works so effectively. When evening comes, people return from work. Some families have to deal with power outages. Therefore, they continue their lives with candles or battery-powered lamps. Dinner, as you can guess, is simple and nutritious. Families come together, trying to relieve the fatigue of the day. However, even their private lives are not entirely their own. Sometimes neighborhood meetings, sometimes compulsory ideological training continues in the evenings. Entertainment options are also limited. Propaganda-filled films, documentaries, or theater plays telling the leader's successes on state television are watched. Music is similarly limited to patriotic marches or songs praising the leader. Among young people, secretly watching South Korean series or movies is popular, but if this is caught, it can have very serious consequences. While we fight over the TV remote at home, there they maybe risk their lives for a series they watch secretly. Before sleeping, many families practice a kind of prayer or moment of respect expressing their loyalty to the regime. Mrs. Lee and Mr. Kim also whisper their wishes for the regime's longevity with their children. Tomorrow morning, the marches will play again. The same routine will start again. This is the story of an ordinary day in North Korea. A life where survival struggle and faith in the regime are blended. Yes, daily life in North Korea is very far from the normality we are used to. Now think about it. You stand in front of the mirror in the morning and want to get a haircut. Normally you go to the hairdresser, flip through a magazine, choose the model you want, right? In North Korea, this situation is a bit different. There is a catalog of hairstyles approved by the state. Yes, you heard right. There really is such a thing. According to rumors, there are about 15 to 20 options for men, and a few more options for women. For men, short cuts are generally preferred, while for women, neat, tidy, or slightly wavy styles are prominent. One of the most popular cuts is also leader Kim Jong-un's iconic hairstyle. You know, that shaved sides and voluminous hair on top? That is quite popular among people. because resembling the leader is a kind of indicator of loyalty to the state. Imagine, one day if it goes out of fashion, will they change the hair of the leader statues on the streets? I don't think so. So what happens if you don't follow these rules? That's where it gets a bit problematic. Authorities expect strict adherence to such rules to prevent admiration for the outside world. Western style, called foreign hairstyles, long or exaggerated cuts are not welcomed. Even among the public, you might encounter criticisms like, "Be guided to the right path," or "Why don't you resemble the leader?" So you're not just coming out of a hairdresser. You're also going through an ideological approval process. As if hairstyle restrictions weren't enough, clothing is also under strict supervision. In North Korea, there's no worry about fast fashion or new seasons. Clothes preferred in daily life are generally practical, plain, and colorless. Dark blues, grays, blacks, and browns are in fashion. Capitalist Western styles like jeans, ripped jeans, miniskirts, or low-cut clothes are strictly forbidden. People are encouraged to wear uniform-like clothes. On special days or official events, the situation is different. Women usually wear the traditional Korean dress, hanbok. Men prefer suits or traditional military-style uniforms and clean clothes. Uniforms are almost mandatory for party members and officials. So what is the purpose of this clothing regulation? To prevent Western influence and luxury consumption, of course. The regime wants people to resemble each other, to stay away from individualism. Everyone is equalized. This prevents wealth differences from being displayed. Thus, the people are kept away from the fashion of the outside world. It's aimed at dress like that, behave like that. Everyone behaving like an ideal North Korean citizen. Sometimes, when colorful, patterned, or flashy clothes smuggled from South Korea are caught, their owners can face heavy penalties. So even a piece of clothing can become a serious crime. As if it's not just clothing, they act like they've caught a spy. In North Korea, fashion is beyond an aesthetic choice. It's an ideological tool of the regime. From hairstyles to clothing, everything is used to reinforce the cult of personality, the Jewish ideology, and the separation from the outside world. The goal is to make the entire population appear as a unified, disciplined, and loyal whole to the leader. It's as if the entire country is a grand theater stage, and everyone is an actor wearing the same costume. Of course, despite these strict rules, it's known that among the younger generations, there is a small-scale curiosity about Western fashion. The clothing styles or hairstyles of characters in secretly watched South Korean dramas can tempt some young people. But since the penalty for being caught is very severe, this curiosity usually stays within the four walls of the home or among very trusted friends. Yes, living in North Korea means dealing with constant surveillance and a series of rules even in matters of dress and appearance. What for us is a simple visit to the hairdresser or a shopping trip is an ideological test for them. Now let's wind the clocks back to the late 1980s. The Cold War is in its final stages. South Korea is showing its modern face to the world with the 1988 Seoul Olympics. North Korean leader Kim Il-sung is naturally offended by this. An idea comes to him, as if to say, "We can model, even surpass this." Building the world's tallest hotel. Not just a hotel, but a symbol to broadcast the power, prosperity, and architectural genius of their regime to the entire world. Thus, the foundations of that famous Ryugyong Hotel were laid in 1987. The hotel was to be exactly 105 stories and pyramid-shaped. Its height was exactly 330 meters. When completed, it would be the seventh tallest building in the world and, of course, would hold the title of the world's tallest hotel. Imagine what a grand claim that was for that era. This massive structure rising in Pyongyang was to be an architectural manifesto of the communist regime, a statement to the world. It was as if shouting, "Look, we exist too, and we are better than you." But of course, things didn't go quite as planned. Construction started at a decent pace. However, in the early 1990s, North Korea entered serious economic trouble. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, they lost their biggest supporter. Money dried up. Construction materials, technology, everything was lacking, and of course, the famous North Korean famine struck. How could the construction of a massive luxury development continue while people were starving? And so, its ghost period began. In 1992, although the building's exterior shell was complete, its interior remained an empty, windowless concrete hulk. It stood like that for a full 16 years. During the day gray and gloomy, at night a pitch-black silhouette rising in Pyongyang's sky like a monument to failure. The world press gave it names like Hotel of Doom, Ghost Hotel, even Cursed Hotel. Some said, "This building will never be finished," while others highlighted how absurd a project North Korea had undertaken. It was as if it wasn't a giant statue, but a giant's unfinished dream. Then, in the late 2000s, surprising news came about this ghost hotel everyone had forgotten. Construction was starting again. An Egyptian telecommunications company, Orascom, in exchange for investment in North Korea, committed to finishing the exterior, and indeed, the building's dull exterior was covered with shiny glass panels. That gray, plastic-looking mass suddenly transformed into a futuristic and shimmering skyscraper. Especially at night with its flashing lights, it looked like a spaceship. While outsiders might have thought, "Ah, it's done now," the reality wasn't like that at all. The building's interior was still largely unfinished. It never hosted a single guest. Not one reservation was ever made. It was even revealed that the hotel's announcements of opening several times were all lies. Inside the rooms, plumbing, furniture, most were either missing or non-existent. So you understand, it had a dazzling makeover on the outside, but underneath, the problems persisted. The Ryugyong Hotel was no longer just a construction failure. It had become a symbol of the message North Korea wants to show the outside world. Today, the Ryugyong Hotel still hasn't opened its doors. It continues to stand like a statue in Pyongyang's silhouette. Sometimes its lights are on, sometimes it's used for massive propaganda displays. But essentially, it is a bitter monument to North Korea's economic ambitions, setbacks, and deficiencies. What was once an ambitious dream project has now gone down in history as a ghost, and the country's never-ending white elephant. Imagine you're living in North Korea. Your every step, every characteristic is under control. Although regime propaganda tells you you live in the best place on earth, the hunger in your stomach, the anxiety in your heart, and the information seeping in secretly from outside whisper a different reality to you. For some in these lands, a single dream emerges, to escape. But this isn't an ordinary escape, because it's the biggest and perhaps the last gamble of your life. Escaping from North Korea isn't just a physical journey, it's also a mental and emotional struggle. People can plan this escape for a long time. Perhaps they listen to a smuggled radio. Maybe a secretly watched soul drama inspires them. Or perhaps hunger, misery, or the fear of increasingly harsh punishments pushes them into this desperation. The idea of escaping as a family is very rare. It's almost impossible. Because if you're caught, not only you, but your entire family, even your relatives, can be punished. Therefore, most often, they set out alone, hearts filled with fear and hope. So, where do they escape to? Crossing directly to South Korea is nearly impossible. The border between the two countries is the world's most heavily fortified area, surrounded by minefields and soldiers, the famous DMZ. Getting out from there is equivalent to suicide. Therefore, most escapes are first made towards China. Although the Chinese border isn't a minefield, it's still full of dangers to be overcome. The first obstacle is the Tumun River or the Yalu River. Sometimes they cross over frozen ice. Sometimes they face the risk of drowning in the strong currents. After crossing the river, the real dangers begin. Border guards, human traffickers, and the risk of being turned in by Chinese people await. China views North Korean defectors as illegal immigrants. They are seen as economic migrants in the region. This means that if caught, they face the risk of being sent directly back to North Korea. And in North Korea, the penalty for attempting to escape is very heavy: labor camps, even death. Imagine, to be caught and sent back on the road you took with dreams of freedom. That's why escape is a kind of choice between freedom or death. On these perilous journeys, defectors are usually helped by brokers or missionaries. Sometimes for money, sometimes out of conscience. They try to hide in China and then reach a third country like Vietnam, Laos, or Thailand. From there, the final target is usually South Korea. These journeys can sometimes take months, even years. During this process, they may encounter horrific risks like falling into the hands of traffickers, being exploited, or even being forced into the sex trade. Every step is like walking through a swamp full of unknowns. For defectors who finally reach South Korea, it's not over. Starting a new life, adapting to a different culture is not easy. While South Korea's capitalist system is overflowing with all sorts of blessings, for those coming from the north, this situation can be a culture shock. Suddenly, mobile phones, the internet, shopping malls, unlimited choices. Sometimes this can lead to adjustment problems, trauma, and loneliness. The South Korean government extends a helping hand to North Korean refugees. It offers education, job-finding support, and even psychological counseling services. However, fully integrating into South Korean society remains a long and challenging process for those from the north. The families, friends, and feelings of guilt they left behind in the north continue to be a part of their lives. Defection stories are a window into the darkness of North Korea. These stories lay bare the boundless courage, hope, and sacrifice of the human spirit in its quest for freedom. Each escape is a rebellion, a resistance, and a journey of hope. Remember Moscow Metro's ornate stations? Well, the Pyongyang Metro is no less impressive. It even has a charm of its own. Opened in 1973, the Pyongyang Metro is one of the deepest metros in the world. Some stations are located a full 110 meters underground. If you ask why so deep, of course, the primary purpose isn't just transportation. It also serves as a nuclear shelter. That is, in case of a possible attack, the entire city population can descend into these metro tunnels and stay safe. It's like a giant atomic bomb shelter and a rapid transit station combined. The metro stations are like works of art reflecting North Korea's splendor. Each station has a name reflecting the revolutionary spirit or ideals: glory, victory, red star, etc. The walls are filled with mosaics, frescoes, and huge statues. These artworks depict the heroic struggles of the leaders, the power of the working class, and the beauty of the socialist paradise. Dazzling chandeliers, marble-clad walls. You feel as if you're walking in an underground palace. Even for tourists, certain stations are open for visits and can be toured with guides, of course. Accessing other closed-off sections is impossible. And what about the metro carriages? Old carriages from the Soviet Union and East Germany are used. But don't worry, they are spotless inside. Because here, just like on the streets, cleanliness and order are very important. While traveling in the carriages, you are accompanied by patriotic marches and quotations from leaders' speeches coming from the loudspeakers. So you're not just traveling, you're also getting an ideological recharge. As much as the ornate stations of the Pyongyang Metro are known, North Korea's secret tunnel networks are just as legendary. These are not open to everyone like metro tunnels. These are one of the regime's biggest secrets. Especially those allegedly dug towards the South Korean border after the Korean War have been a significant part of international tension for years. South Korea announced it discovered 4 infiltration tunnels under its borders. They claim these tunnels aren't small holes. They are large enough for even a fully equipped military unit to pass through. They even say the rails and ventilation systems inside suggest they were dug for military purposes. According to South Korea, these tunnels are to be used for North Korean soldiers to infiltrate the South quickly and secretly in case of a possible war. Imagine, you wake up one morning and soldiers are pouring out from underground. It's like a horror movie. North Korea claims these tunnels are coal mines. We were looking for coal. What's wrong with that? They say. But no one believes this. All the discovered tunnels slope towards South Korea and head in directions that are geologically not coal-bearing areas. So this coal story isn't very convincing. Exactly how many of these tunnels exist, how far they extend, is a complete mystery. Some estimates suggest there are dozens of tunnel networks under the border, and some of them might pass directly under Seoul. Just these claims are enough to frighten a person. These tunnel networks are one of the most concrete pieces of evidence of how paranoid and militaristic the North Korean regime is. It shows that they have built a massive network underground to be prepared for a possible war and to surprise their enemies. These tunnels also continue to be a constant source of tension in the international arena. Yes, beneath Pyongyang's surface lie even deeper secrets. Both the showy metro stations and the secret tunnel networks reveal the unique and mysterious character of North Korea. Now imagine, while thinking about vacation plans and where to go this summer, North Korea comes to your mind. After the initial shock, yes, you can actually go there as a tourist. You start the visa application process. Independent travel to North Korea is not allowed. You absolutely must go through state-approved tour companies. These companies usually operate from China or certain European countries. The application process is long and detailed, because the regime thoroughly vets you. You got your visa, boarded the plane, and landed in Pyongyang. From the first moment, you feel your freedom is restricted. At the airport, you are greeted by guides who smile but whose eyes scan everywhere. And know that these guides aren't just there to inform. They are also tasked with keeping an eye on you. They won't leave your side for a moment throughout your tour. It's as if you're on a school trip and the teachers are following your every step. Going somewhere alone, straying from the guides, or communicating with locals is strictly forbidden. Be careful with your camera too. There are strict rules about what you can and cannot film. Poverty. Places that might show signs of poverty, or approaching military installations or statues disrespectfully, all of these are red lines. The tourist experience in North Korea is actually a kind of Showcase tour. The regime only shows you what it wants you to see. The grand squares of Pyongyang, the showy monuments, metro stations, model farms, children's palaces, and of course, the statues of the leaders. The places you see are spotless. It's like a flawless stage set. The guides feed you with memorized stories about how prosperous the country is, how happy the people are, and how wise the leader is. However, the realities underlying this perfect image are usually hidden. The city's poor neighborhoods, the harsh living conditions in rural areas, traces of famine. You are not allowed to witness any of these. Your interaction with the public is also limited. The people you meet are likely vetted individuals who will give the correct answers. Your questions are pre-filtered, and the answers you get are predetermined. You know, like during holiday visits, the question, "How are your studies going?" is standard, and the answer is standard too. It's the same there, but on a national scale. The meals you eat in restaurants are luxurious compared to what most people outside cannot eat. The places you can shop are state stores, and the prices are quite high. So, what you see and experience is actually a message the regime wants to present to the world. We are strong, we are happy, and we are surviving. Throughout your tour, you constantly feel like you're being followed with a camera. Even the photos you take with your own camera can sometimes be checked by the guides. The mobile phones or other electronic devices you bring from your country are taken at customs and given back to you upon exit. So, there's no chance of saying, "Let me post an Instagram story right now." So, despite all these restrictions, why do people go to North Korea? Some go out of curiosity, some to have a historical experience, and some to see this mysterious country with their own eyes. However, there's a common point for everyone. Being a tourist in North Korea is actually about assuming the role of not only an observer but also the observed. When your trip ends and you leave the country, you leave behind a strange mix of feelings. Did you witness reality, or did you act in a theatrical play staged by the regime? While these questions swirl in your head, North Korea remains in the depths of your mind as a unique and eerie experience. It's like you've stepped out of a science fiction movie. Now, let's look at some of the most talked about myths about North Korea in the West. In North Korea, only 28 or 15 hairstyles are legal. This myth is based on the truth that hairstyles in North Korea are state-regulated. However, the number is often exaggerated to just 28. Yes, hairstyles are limited and state-approved, but this number isn't fixed, and sometimes more options are available. Kim Jong-un's hairstyle still being popular is completely true. So the myth has some truth but is exaggerated. A unicorn lair was discovered. Yes, this is among the fantastic myths. In 2012, North Korean archaeologists claimed to have found the lair of a legendary unicorn. Although Western media reported this as news, it was actually a reference to an old Korean legend about a unicorn-like creature called Kirin. So the legend is real, but not as the West understood it. Kim Jong-un had his uncle fed to dogs. This is one of the most sensational and blood-curdling claims. It is confirmed that Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-thaek, was executed. However, the claim that he was fed to dogs actually originated from a satirical blog in China and quickly spread as a rumor. Kim Jong-un's ruthlessness is a fact, but this method of execution is likely a myth. North Korea gives everyone the same car. This is also false. Owning a car in North Korea is a great luxury and is very limited. Only high-ranking party officials and a very few wealthy people can own a car. The vast majority of the population does not have a car. So there's no situation like giving everyone the same car, because most people don't have a car in the first place. So, what are the things the West says? Is this real too? About? Here they are. 3-generation punishment. Yes, unfortunately, real. If a person commits a political crime, not only they but up to 3 generations of their family can be sent to political prison camps. This is a bitter reality showing the regime's absolute control and how it spreads fear. State television channels and radios. We mentioned this before. Yes, real. The country has only a few television channels controlled by the state, and they constantly broadcast propaganda. Radio's frequencies are fixed, so listening to another station is forbidden. Those who secretly listen to foreign broadcasts can face heavy punishments. Secret South Korean dramas and movies. This is also real. Among the North Korean people, secretly smuggled South Korean dramas, K-pop music, and movies are quite popular. Despite being illegal, people satisfy their curiosity about the outside world this way. Penalties for those caught can be severe, even up to execution, but despite the risk, they are popular. Famine and starvation. Unfortunately, a tragic reality. Especially the Great Famine in the 1990s, the arduous march, cost the lives of hundreds of thousands, even millions of people. The country still suffers from food shortages and is dependent on international aid. The fact that the money the regime spends on its nuclear program is not spent on feeding its people is a huge contradiction. Mass games. Spectacular and real. These massive shows, performed by tens of thousands of people with perfect synchronicity, showcase the regime's discipline, power, and control. Tourists can also watch these shows, and they truly amaze, but they also clearly show the pressure on the people. Imagine you're at a dinner table in North Korea. Don't expect abundant, varied dishes. North Korean cuisine is directly linked to the country's climate and economic conditions. Especially after the terrible famine of the 1990s, the arduous march, food resources are limited, and nutrition is still a struggle for the vast majority of the population. Therefore, their cuisine is based on the principle of making do with little and utilizing everything. However, this doesn't mean North Korean cuisine is tasteless. On the contrary, it has quite rich and unique flavors within its own context. Traditional flavors specific to the northern regions of the Korean peninsula differ from southern ones. More potatoes, corn, cabbage, and seafood are used. Their spices usually consist of the trio of chili pepper, garlic, and ginger, which gives the food a sharp taste. If there's one dish that has become a symbol of North Korean cuisine that you must try, it's Pyongyang naengmyeon. As the name suggests, it's a cold noodle dish, typically eaten to cool off, especially in summer. Thin and chewy buckwheat noodles are served in an ice-cold broth made from boiled beef broth. It's usually topped with thinly sliced beef, radish, cucumber, a slice of boiled egg, and a pinch of pickled vegetables. Naengmyeon isn't just a dish, it's a source of national pride for North Korea. It's no coincidence that it's one of the first dishes offered to foreign guests. It was even served at summits with South Korea, as if it were a peace gesture. Of course, serving cold noodles might seem strange to some Western palates, but once you get used to it, it can be addictive. Just saying. When you think of Korean cuisine, the first thing that comes to mind is kimchi, right? In North Korea, it's no different. However, northern kimchi is generally less spicy and less salty than its southern counterpart. Kimchi, prepared by fermenting various vegetables, takes its place at the table at every meal. Other popular dishes include tteok, steamed rice cakes, mandu, dumplings filled with various vegetables and sometimes meat, and northern versions of bibimbap, mixed rice with vegetables. Seafood is also an important source of nutrition, especially for those living on the coast. Fresh fish, squid, and mussels are often grilled or steamed. Now, let's come to perhaps the most controversial part of North Korean cuisine: dog meat. Especially harshly criticized by animal rights activists in the West, dog meat consumption is a tradition that has continued for centuries on the Korean peninsula. In North Korea, dog meat is seen as a food believed to have health benefits, consumed for energy, especially in summer. There are various recipes for dog meat stew in North Korea, and it's often called basantang. Basantang, a soup made with dog meat boiled in a spicy broth with vegetables and various herbs, is a popular dish among the older generation, though not commonly found. Of course, this dish is usually not presented to Westerners, and it's not much talked about publicly. But it is a reality, a tradition that still holds its place within North Korean culture. North Korean cuisine is not just about flavors. It is also a mirror of a people, a country, and its struggle. Despite restrictions, traditional tastes continue to adapt to new hardships. However, the country still experiences serious food problems, and the quality of this cuisine remains under the shadow of uncertainty. Yes, North Korean cuisine contains many different flavors and cultural values, from cold noodles to dog meat. Maybe some of them don't suit our palate, but it's certain that behind every food there is a story, a struggle for life. Imagine you're a small child in North Korea. Your school life begins very differently from children in other parts of the world. From the very first day, at the top of what is taught is the absolute love and gratitude for the Kim family. Classroom walls are decorated with portraits of the leaders and their words. Lessons and activities constantly give you the message that you must live by taking their genius and sacrifices as an example. It's as if it's not a school but a tiny temple of the leader cult. A significant part of the curriculum consists of subjects like revolutionary history and democratic revolutionary activities. In these lessons, Kim Il-sung's struggle against the Japanese, his victories in the Korean War, and how he brought prosperity to the country are taught. Similarly, Kim Jong-il's and Kim Jong-un's achievements are taught in epic language. History books offer a completely different, one-sided narrative from the West's perspective. There are even stories about the leader's extraordinary abilities and miracles. Imagine being taught things like, "Our leader can ride clouds." Of course, there are subjects like science, math, and geography, but even they are blended with ideology. For example, in a science lesson, how the leader contributed to creating fertile lands. In a math lesson, calculations made in wars against enemies might be taught. The goal is to emphasize the leader's superiority and guidance in every field. In North Korea's education system, collective spirit and social harmony are much more important than individual success. Children from a young age learn to act within the group, to prioritize group interests over their own. Cooperation is encouraged among classmates rather than competition. But of course, this cooperation can also operate in a sense of watch each other, but report any wrongdoing. Students' loyalty and ideological attitudes are constantly observed in schools and youth organizations. Students can be encouraged to monitor each other and report any wrong thoughts or behaviors. This situation prevents children from thinking freely or developing a critical perspective. The curriculum, anyway, is based on obedience and loyalty, not critical thinking. It's as if students are raised as ideological soldiers. Education isn't limited to classrooms. After-school activities are quite common. These can be ideological training, rehearsals for the leader's birthday celebrations, or sports events. A large number of children participate in intensive rehearsals to take part in shows called mass games. In these shows, thousands of children create portraits of the leaders or propaganda messages with precise movements and colored cards. This is a massive educational tool that reinforces both physical discipline and ideological loyalty. After high school, those who continue to university must pass strict exams. However, in addition to academic success, social status called songbun and loyalty to the regime are also decisive factors for university entrance. So, in addition to being a good student, you need to have a good family background. Universities are also under state control, and the curriculum is again ideology heavy. After graduation, the state assigns a job for everyone. People have almost no freedom to choose their own careers. From teacher to miner, from engineer to clerk, one's role is assigned by the state. The goal is to position everyone according to the country's needs and strategy. So, in a way, the state writes the script of your life, and you just play the role in that script. North Korea's education system aims to unite a nation around a single ideology, to prevent deviation from that ideology, and to create a society closed to the outside world. This system prioritizes loyalty to the regime and collective welfare over individual talents. Now imagine, you are in an international sports competition. A North Korean athlete is on the podium, a gold medal around their neck, standing with a stoic expression, saluting their leader. To a Western eye, this might just seem like a sporting victory, but for North Korea, it means much more. A medal isn't just a medal. It is proof of the regime's power, the correctness of Juche, and the leader's genius. In North Korea, sports serve an ideological purpose under state control. Children are selected at a young age according to their potential and put through rigorous training. Athletes who will participate in the Olympics or international championships are chosen from the country's most elite circles and trained almost like special forces. Like in the education system, ideological lessons and loyalty to the leaders are emphasized in sports academies. Training isn't just physical. It's also mental discipline and education in absolute loyalty to the regime. It's as if every push-up, every run is a way of thanking the leader. The regime's basic goal is to send the message. Even if we are backward compared to the West, we can beat them. Medals won in the international arena strengthen the internal propaganda aimed at the North Korean people. The people once again believe how strong they are under their leader's guidance. Imagine, the biggest advertisement for a country is done through its athletes. However, the expectations from athletes are high. Poor performance or, God forbid, being too friendly with the opposing team can lead to unpleasant situations. Defeats can be interpreted by the regime as inadequacy or even betrayal. There are even claims that athletes who perform poorly are sent to labor camps or have their ranks lowered. Of course, such claims are never confirmed by North Korea. But given the nature of the regime, it's plausible. So, the weight on an athlete's shoulders isn't just their own career, it's the country's image and their own future. Sports in North Korea are definitely not just sports. It's a show, a propaganda tool, and the regime's secret weapon in the international arena. Athletes are both representatives of their country and living carriers of the message they carry. Now think about it. When you open your eyes in the morning, the first thing you look at is your phone, right? Social media, news, messages. In North Korea, the situation is a bit calmer. Are there smartphones? Yes, there are, but not widespread. Since 2008, Local brands like Pyongyang or Arirang have been produced, but these phones are actually imported from China and equipped with North Korea-specific software. They are not the latest model iPhones, of course. They are devices with basic smartphone features. So what can you do with these phones? Communicate with the outside world? Never. These phones only allow domestic calls and messaging. So you can call your neighbor, send a message to your colleague. But calling your cousin in South Korea or texting someone in the West is impossible. Even foreigners and North Koreans use separate phone networks, thus preventing unwanted communication. This is an important part of the regime's strategy to cut off the people's connection with the outside world. The apps preloaded on the phones are also very limited. State-approved games, ebooks containing leaders' speeches, propaganda news apps, and some educational apps. Social media apps like Instagram, YouTube, Google? Those can't even be dreamed of. Imagine if you had to apply to the state just to like a photo on Instagram. Owning a phone is also a luxury in North Korea. Prices are quite high relative to average income, so usually only high-ranking officials, wealthy families, or people in certain professions can own phones. So you won't see a smartphone in everyone's pocket. Even GPS features on phones are usually disabled because they could hinder state control. Now let's get to the real question. Is there internet? Answer: yes, but not our internet. In North Korea, there is no internet network accessible to the vast majority of the population. Instead, there is an internet called Kwangmyeong, which is completely under state control. Kwangmyeong is a national network and only permits access to websites hosted within North Korea. These sites usually consist of official news sources, university sites, e-libraries, some forums containing technical information, and ideological platforms. So browsing the global internet, visiting news sites, hanging out on social media, or watching videos on YouTube is impossible. It's like a giant library, but only books approved by the regime are allowed. Global internet access is provided only to a very limited segment, usually high-ranking party members, scientists, university professors, and very rarely diplomats. Their access is also strictly monitored, and which sites they can visit are recorded. You know, while we worry about our internet package running out of internet access authorization, there has a very different meaning. This situation leads to North Korea being almost completely disconnected from the outside world. The only things people know about what's happening in the world are what the state media tells them. This shows why the regime's propaganda is so effective. Since the people don't know the realities outside, they more easily believe their country is a paradise. North Korea isn't completely against technology, but they use technology according to their own rules. For example, they don't hesitate to use advanced technology to develop their nuclear and missile programs. However, this technology isn't used in a way that would liberate the people or connect them with the outside world. It's used to strengthen the regime's power and increase control. There are a small number of computers in the country. However, these are also usually used in state institutions, schools, or certain corporate firms. Again, internet access is limited, and most computers serve to fulfill their designated tasks. Yes, in an age where technology is so widespread, North Korea is a country that has built its own digital walls. Smartphones and the internet, which are tools of freedom and connection elsewhere, have become part of a strict control and isolation policy here. It makes you feel like you've gotten into a time machine and gone back to the 80s. According to North Korea's official publications, thanks to the boundless genius of the leaders, their country is the most perfect socialist paradise. Such a place where everyone is equal, everyone is happy, everyone is united and strong. You know those utopian societies in our movies where everything is perfect? Well, North Korea is exactly such a place. The foundation of this utopia is the Jewish philosophy. Remember, it means self-reliance, but in reality it meant separation from the world. According to North Korean doctrine, they are the only country that can stand on its own feet without depending on the outside world. Their own resources, their own people, their own ideology. They have created a society superior to the influences of imperialists, pure and untainted. Propaganda machines work day and night to build this utopia. In films, songs, school books, and constantly ongoing media broadcasts, it is told what a great success story North Korea is. Even if the people suffer from hunger, they are taught that the reason for this is the sanctions imposed by external enemies. They are made to believe that their difficulties are temporary, and that under their leaders' guidance, they will achieve victory and become a country envied by the world. You know those games we play as kids where we build the most beautiful city? The reality is far from this utopia. While the regime shows off this perfect image to the outside, the lives of ordinary people are full of hardship. Economic difficulties, food shortages, limited freedoms, and constant surveillance. This is North Korea's real face. However, there's another side to this coin. While the people struggle with these difficulties, the lives of the Kim family and the ruling elite are quite different. It is known that the Kim family enjoys a life of luxury. This is one of the biggest contradictions of the regime. While the people suffer from hunger, the leaders live in extreme luxury. This situation is a concrete example of the regime's hypocrisy and injustice. Some known examples of this luxury spending, despite international sanctions, are luxury cars. Kim Jong-un is known to have a huge luxury car collection. From Russian-made armored limousines to Mercedes-Benzes, Rolls-Royces to Land Rovers, many expensive vehicles are smuggled into the country despite UN sanctions. Kim Jong-un's wife Ri Sol-ju being photographed with a luxury Gucci bag is one of the latest known examples of this. Yachts, private jets, and trains. The family has private yachts, jets, and fortified trains. Kim Jong-il's special train used for long journeys was famous. Kim Jong-un's private jet fleet and luxury boats used at sea are known. Gourmet food and drinks. While the people suffer from famine, the Kim family imports luxury food and drinks from all over the world. Swiss cheeses, Japanese sushi. Kim Jong-il had a special sushi chef. French cognacs and exotic fruits are never missing from their tables. While we might think, should I buy a kilo of meat or not? The meats they taste are probably consumed only on special occasions. Luxury mansions and vacation islands. The Kim family has many luxury mansions and private vacation villas within the country. Kim Jong-un even has a private island, with its pools, water parks, and special areas for parties, entertainment, and hobbies. Kim Jong-il's passion for cinema and his archive of thousands of films are known. Kim Jong-un's interest in basketball and inviting NBA stars is also included in these luxury expenditures. These luxury expenditures reveal how easily international sanctions are circumvented and how the leadership prioritizes its own interests, despite the country's hardships. Luxury goods are usually smuggled into the country through courier networks, or using complex sea and land routes. The Kim family's lavish lifestyle and wealth stand in sharp contrast to the reality that a large part of the country lives on the brink of poverty. This situation is one of the most concrete indicators of the regime's hypocrisy and injustice towards its own people. On one hand, the image of a socialist paradise promoted by propaganda. On the other, the painful reality of a people sacrificed for the personal ambitions of a small elite. Yes, the Kim family's wealth is one of the clearest proofs of this harshness in North Korea. The fact that they possess billions in assets in a world where the people struggle with hunger once again lays bare the dark face of the regime. Now we come to the North Korean army. Now imagine. Think of a country with a population of about 26 million. The number of active soldiers in this country exceeds 1.2 million. In addition to this, there is a reserve force of several million and paramilitary groups like the Worker-Peasant Red Guards. So almost a quarter or more of the total population is within the military structure. These numbers make North Korea's army one of the largest in the world. According to some sources, the country with the fourth largest army. So why does such a tiny country have such a massive army? The answer can be summarized in one word: survival. North Korea feels constantly surrounded by external threats, in the middle of a hostile world. Especially the United States and South Korea are seen as the main enemies. The fact that the Korean War technically never ended, there's only a ceasefire, reinforces the perception that the country lives under a constant threat of war. This massive army is the concrete manifestation of this existential fear and paranoia. At the heart of North Korea's military structure lies the Sungun, military first, policy. Remember, this philosophy emerged during Kim Jong-il's era. It means, army first. That is, all the country's resources, priorities, and energy should be devoted to strengthening the army. While the people go hungry, the army must be fed, armed, and modernized. This policy is not just a military strategy. It is also the backbone of the country's management philosophy and ideology. The Sungun policy has several basic aims. Regime security. The primary aim is to protect the absolute power of the Kim dynasty and the regime against internal and external threats. A strong army is the most effective way to suppress internal uprisings and deter opposition. External deterrence. To create a deterrent force against a possible invasion, especially by the US and South Korea. In addition to conventional weapons, North Korea sees its nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles as the most important elements of this deterrence. They claim they can even hit the US mainland with these missiles. International bargaining chip. Nuclear weapons are both the greatest deterrent and a tool to gain a place at the table in the international arena. North Korea's military inventory is very comprehensive in terms of numbers but generally technologically backward. Most tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery are leftovers from the old Soviet era or based on Chinese technology. However, North Korea tries to compensate for this technological gap with numbers. That is, the logic of, "We may not be modern, but we are many," is followed. Especially artillery batteries and rocket systems are positioned to be within range of Seoul, the capital of South Korea. However, in recent years, North Korea has accelerated its efforts to modernize its army. They are focusing on new armored weapon systems and especially hypersonic missiles. While these new systems may not be the most advanced compared to the West's, they have the potential to pose a serious threat when deployed in large numbers. The most important and dangerous dimension of North Korea's military strategy is its nuclear weapons program. Despite all sanctions and crises, the country continues its nuclear warhead production and the long-range ballistic missiles to carry them. They claim they can even hit the US mainland with these missiles. Nuclear weapons are both the ultimate deterrent and a tool for gaining a place in the international arena. Military service in North Korea is compulsory and its conditions are quite long. For men, it can be 5 to 10 years, for women, a few years. This causes every segment of society to be intertwined with the army in some way. Military service isn't just a duty, it's also a process of social status and ideological education. Those who serve are further reinforced in their loyalty to the party and the leader. The North Korean army isn't just a fighting force, it also functions as an economic power and a comprehensive social engineering tool. Soldiers are also used in major construction projects, agricultural work, and infrastructure works. Yes, North Korea's army reveals the deep paranoia, survival anxiety, and unique management formula of the regime. But it's not just a military force of a country, it's also the dramatic expression of a regime's struggle for survival. The future of North Korea, current situation and possible scenarios. North Korea continues to exist. A country ruled by a single party, a single leader, and a strict ideological management. A country that possesses nuclear weapons, has isolated its people from the outside world, and resists like a fortress despite international sanctions. The key to this fortress is in the hands of the Kim dynasty, and they seem to consider every way permissible to maintain their power. In the current situation, North Korea's most important priorities are survival of the regime, protecting the Kim family's power and the country's current political structure. This is above everything else. Nuclear armament, continuing and advancing their nuclear program. For them, this is the only way to gain respect in the international arena and keep themselves safe against external threats. Economic development, overcoming economic difficulties with the principle of self-reliance. However, this is usually done by focusing on prestige projects rather than people's welfare. So why is such a repressive regime still standing? The main reasons include a strong internal surveillance network, nationalism reinforced by portraying the outside world as a threat, ideological brainwashing, and the army's absolute support. Additionally, China's tacit support, given its concerns that the collapse of North Korea would create instability on its borders, plays an important role in the regime's continuity. There are a few different scenarios discussed for North Korea's future. None are certain, but all present certain risks and possibilities. 1. Continuation of the current stalemate. One likely scenario is that North Korea continues its current policies, maintains its nuclear arsenal, gets used to living with international sanctions, and tries to stay at the table by occasionally making provocations. Internally, the repressive regime and propaganda will continue. In this scenario, no major change is expected. It's just a kind of chronicization of the current situation. Point 2. Economic reforms and opening up. In some cases, Kim Jong-un might try to implement controlled economic reforms similar to the Chinese model, allowing small-scale private activities, attracting foreign investment under strict supervision, and slightly improving the people's standard of living. In this scenario, while the political system doesn't change, small improvements in economic and social life might be seen. However, these reforms would not be in a way that risks regime control. 3. Collapse of the regime and unification. One of the most dramatic scenarios is the collapse of the regime due to internal turmoil, economic problems, a popular uprising, or external pressure, and the unification of the Korean peninsula. However, this is a very complex and dangerous scenario. While it would create a huge cost and social integration problem for South Korea, it could also lead to geopolitical tensions between China and the US. Also, control of nuclear weapons would pose a major problem. Although this scenario is much desired, it is the most difficult and challenging one. 4. Military conflict. In the worst-case scenario, tensions escalating on the peninsula turning into a military conflict. Especially the risk of nuclear weapons being used makes this scenario a nightmare for everyone. This situation could lead to catastrophes not only for the Korean peninsula but for the entire world. So, is a genuine change possible in North Korea? This is a billion-dollar question. Change can be internal or external. Internal change could be triggered by factors like increasing discontent among the people, a split within the leadership, or a military coup. However, the regime's tight surveillance network and capacity for repression makes such a change very difficult. Still, the infiltration of South Korean dramas and information about the outside world, especially among the younger generations, could lead to some mental changes. External influence, international sanctions, diplomatic efforts, and policies like South Korea's Sunshine Policy could push for change. However, North Korea is generally resistant to external pressures and can use them to strengthen its internal propaganda. It should not be forgotten that although North Korea appears as a kibbutz closed to the outside world, it is actually a complex country with its own internal dynamics. The shape of the future will be shaped by global balances, the decisions of the Kim family, and the silent changes within. Perhaps one day those tight curtains will open and the world will see the true face of North Korea. Who knows, maybe one day people in Pyongyang will be walking freely with hairstyles of their own choice, eating cold noodles in a cafe. This is a future scenario that gives hope to many people. Yes, we have come to the end of another video. In this video where we examine North Korea in depth, we tried to explore the founding story of this mysterious country, its lifestyle, propaganda, cuisine, and army. I hope you have had as much fun and learned as many new things as I have on this journey. History is not just about the past. It also helps us understand our present and change our future. Good night.